Although the Great Pyramid, as Ignatius Donnelly has demonstrated, is patterned after an antediluvian type of architecture, examples of which are to be found in nearly every part of the world, the Sphinx, is typically Egyptian. The stele between its paws states the Sphinx is an image of the sun god, Harmachis, which was evidently made in the similitude of the pharaoh during whose reign it was chiseled. The statue was restored and completely excavated by Thutmose IV as the result of a vision in which the god had appeared and declared himself oppressed by the weight of the sand about his body. The broken beard of the Sphinx was discovered during excavations between the front paws. The steps leading up to the Sphinx, and also the temple and altar between the paws, are much later additions, probably Roman, for it is known that the Romans reconstructed many Egyptian antiquities. The shallow depression in the crown of the head, once thought to be the terminus of a closed-up passageway leading from the Sphinx to the Great Pyramid, was merely intended to help support a headdress now missing. Metal rods have been driven into the Sphinx in a vain effort to discover chambers or passages within its body. The major part of the Sphinx is a single stone, but the front paws have been built up of smaller stones. The Sphinx is about 200 feet long, 70 feet high, and 38 feet wide across the shoulders. The main stone from which it was carved is believed by some to have been transported from distant quarries by methods unknown, while others assert it to be a native rock, possibly an outcropping, somewhat resembling the form into which it was later carved. The theory once advanced that both the pyramid and the Sphinx were built from artificial stones made on the spot has been abandoned. A careful analysis of the limestone shows it to be composed of small sea creatures called mumalites. The popular supposition that the Sphinx was the true portal of the Great Pyramid, while it survives with surprising tenacity, has never been substantiated. P. Christian presents this theory as follows, basing it in part upon the authority of Iamblichus. The Sphinx of Gizeh, says the author of the Traité des Mystères, served as the entrance to the sacred subterranean chambers in which the trials of the initiate were undergone. This entrance, obstructed in our days by sands and rubbish, may still be traced between the forelegs of the crouched colossus. It was formerly closed by a bronze gate whose secret spring could be operated only by the Magi. It was guarded by public respect, and a sort of religious fear maintained its inviolability better than armed protection would have done. In the belly of the Sphinx were cut out galleries leading to the subterranean part of the Great Pyramid. These galleries were so artfully crisscrossed along their course to the pyramid that in setting forth into the passage without a guide through this network, one ceaselessly and inevitably returned to the starting point. See Histoire de la Magie. Unfortunately, the bronze door referred to cannot be found, nor is there any evidence that it ever existed. The passing centuries have wrought many changes in the Colossus, however, and the original opening may have been closed. Nearly all students of the subject believe that subterranean chambers exist beneath the Great Pyramid. Robert Ballard writes, "The priests of the pyramids of Lake Moeris had their vast subterranean residences. It appears to me more than probable that those of Gizeh were similarly provided, and I may go further. Out of these very caverns may have been excavated the limestone of which the pyramids were built, and the bowels of the limestone ridge on which the pyramids are built will yet be found. I feel convinced ample information as to their uses. A good diamond drill, with 200 or 300 feet of rods, is what is wanted to test this, and the solidity of the pyramids at the same time." See the solution of the pyramid problem. The King's Chamber is an oblong apartment, 39 feet long, 17 feet wide, and 19 feet high, disregarding fractional parts of a foot in each case, with a flat roof consisting of 9 great stones, the largest in the pyramid. Above the King's Chamber are 5 low compartments, generally termed construction chambers. In the lowest of these, the so-called hieroglyphs of the pharaoh Cheops are located. The roof of the 5th construction chamber is peaked. At the end of the King's Chamber, opposite the entrance, stands the famous sarcophagus, or coffer, and behind it is a shallow opening that was dug in the hope of discovering valuables. 2 air vents, passing through the entire body of the pyramid, ventilate the King's Chamber. In itself, this is sufficient to establish that the building was not intended for a tomb. Between the upper end of the gallery and the king's chamber is a small antechamber, its extreme length 9 feet, its extreme width 5 feet, and its extreme height 12 feet, with its walls grooved, for purposes now unknown. In the grooves nearest the grand gallery is a slab of stone in 2 sections, with a peculiar boss or knob protruding about an inch from the surface of the upper part facing the grand gallery. This stone does not reach to the floor of the antechamber, and those entering the king's chamber must pass under the slab. From the king's chamber, the grand gallery, 157 feet in length, 28 feet in height, 7 feet in width at its widest point, and decreasing to 3.5 feet as the result of 7 converging overlaps of the stones forming the walls, descends to a little above the level of the queen's chamber. Here a gallery branches off, passing more than 100 feet back towards the center of the pyramid and opening into the queen's chamber. The queen's chamber is 19 feet long, 17 feet wide, and 20 feet high. Its roof is peaked and composed of great slabs of stone. Air passages not shown lead from the queen's chamber, but these were not open originally. In the east wall of the queen's chamber is a peculiar niche of gradually converging stone, which in all likelihood may prove to be a new lost entranceway. The point where the grand gallery ends and the horizontal passage towards the queen's chamber begins is the entrance to the well, and also the opening leading down the first ascending passage to the point where this passage meets the descending passage, leading from the outer wall of the pyramid down to the subterranean chamber. After descending 59 feet down the well, the grotto is reached. Continuing the floor of the grotto, the well leads downward 133 feet to the descending entrance passage, which it meets a short distance before this passage becomes horizontal and leads into the subterranean chamber. The subterranean chamber is about 46 long, 27 feet wide, but is extremely low, the ceiling varying in height from a little over 3 feet to about 13 feet from the rough and apparently unfinished floor. From the south side of the subterranean chamber, a low tunnel runs 50 feet and then meets a blank wall. These constitute the only known openings in the pyramid, with the exception of a few niches, exploration holes, blind passages, and the rambling cavernous tunnel hewn out by the Muslims under the leadership of the Prophet's descendant, Caliph al-Mu'min. Mr. Ballard's theory of extensive underground apartments and quarries brings up an important problem in architectonics. The pyramid builders were too far-sighted to endanger the permanence of the Great Pyramid by placing over 5 million tons of limestone and granite on any but a solid foundation. It is therefore reasonably certain that such chambers or passageways as may exist beneath the building are relatively insignificant, like those within the body of the structure, which occupy less than 1/1600th of the cubic contents of the pyramid. The Sphinx was undoubtedly erected for symbolical purposes at the instigation of priestcraft. The theories that the uraeus upon its forehead was originally the finger of an immense sundial, and that both the pyramid and the Sphinx were used to measure time, the seasons, and the precession of the equinoxes, are ingenious, but not wholly convincing. If this great creature was erected to obliterate the ancient passageway leading into the subterranean temple of the pyramid, its symbolism would be most appropriate. In comparison with the overwhelming size and dignity of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx is almost insignificant. Its battered face, upon which may still be seen vestiges of the red paints with which the figure was originally covered, is disfigured beyond recognition. Its nose was broken off by a fanatical Mohammedan, lest the followers of the Prophet be led into idolatry. The very nature of its construction and the present repairs necessary to prevent the head from falling off indicate that it could not have survived the great periods of time which have elapsed since the erection of the pyramid. To the Egyptians, the Sphinx was the symbol of strength and intelligence. It was portrayed as androgynous to signify that they recognized the initiates and the gods as partaking of both the positive and negative creative powers. Gerald Massey writes, "This is the secret of the Sphinx. The orthodox Sphinx of Egypt is masculine in front and feminine behind. So is the image of Typhon, a type of horn and tail, male in front and female behind. The pharaohs who wore the tail of the lioness or cow behind them were male in front and female behind. Like the gods, they included the dual totality of being in one person, born of the mother, but of both sexes as the child. See the Natural Genesis." Most investigators have ridiculed the Sphinx, and without even deigning to investigate the great colossus, have turned their attention to the more overwhelming mystery of the pyramid. The word pyramid is popularly supposed to be derived from, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, fire, thus signifying that it is the symbolic representation of the one divine flame, the life of every creature. John Taylor believes the word pyramid to mean a measure of wheat, while C. Piazzi Smith favors the Coptic meaning a division into 10. The initiates of old accepted that the pyramid's form as the ideal symbol of both the secret doctrine and those institutions established for its dissemination. Both pyramids and mounds are antitypes of the holy mountain, or high place of God, which was believed to stand in the midst of the earth. John P. Lundy relates the Great Pyramid to the fabled Olympus, further assuming that its subterranean passages correspond to the tortuous byways of Hades. The square base of the pyramid is a constant reminder that the House of Wisdom is firmly founded upon nature and her immutable laws. The Gnostics write, Albert Pike, claimed that the whole edifice of their science rested on the square whose angles were silence, profundity, intelligence, truth. See Morals and Dogma. The sides of the Great Pyramid face the four cardinal angles, the latter signifying, according to Eliphas Levi, the extremities of heat and cold, south and north, and the extremities of light and darkness, east and west. The base of the pyramid further represents the four material elements or substances from the combinations of which the quaternary body of man is formed. From each side of the square there rises a triangle, typifying the threefold divine being enthroned within every quaternary, material nature. If each base line be considered a square, from which ascends a threefold spiritual power, then the sum of the lines of the four faces, 12, and the four hypothetical squares, 16, constituting the base is 28, the sacred number of the lower world. If this be added to the three septenaries, composing the sun, 21, it equals 49, the square of 7, and the number of the universe. The 12 signs of the zodiac, like the governors of the lower worlds, are symbolized by 12 lines of the four triangles. The face of the pyramid in the midst of each face is one of the beasts of Ezekiel, and the structure as a whole becomes the cherubim. The three main chambers of the pyramid are related to the heart, the brain, and the generative system, the spiritual centers of the human constitution. The triangular form of the pyramid also is similar to the posture assumed by the body during the ancient meditative exercises. The mysteries taught that the divine energies from the gods descended upon the top of the pyramid, which was likened to an inverted tree with its branches below and its roots at the apex. From this inverted tree, the divine wisdom is disseminated by streaming down the diverging sides and radiating throughout the world. The size of the capstone of the pyramid cannot be accurately determined, for, while most investigators have assumed that it was once in place, no vestige of it now remains. There is a curious tendency among the builders of great religious edifices to leave their creations unfinished, thereby signifying that God alone is complete. The capstone, if it existed, was itself a miniature pyramid, the apex of which again would be capped by a smaller block of a similar shape, and so on ad infinitum. The capstone, therefore, is the epitome of the entire structure. Thus, the pyramid may be likened to the universe, and the capstone to man. Following the chain of analogy, the mind is the capstone of man, the spirit the capstone of the mind, and God, the epitome of the whole and the capstone of the spirit. As a rough and unfinished block, man is taken from the quarry, and by the secret culture of the mysteries, gradually transformed into a true and perfect pyramidal capstone. The temple is complete only when the initiate himself becomes the living apex through which the divine power is focused into the diverging structure below. W. Marsham Adams calls the Great Pyramid the House of the Hidden Places. Such indeed it was, for it represented the inner sanctuary of the pre-Egyptian wisdom. By the Egyptians, the Great Pyramid was associated with Hermes, the god of wisdom and letters, and the divine illuminator, worshipped through the planet Mercury. Relating Hermes to the pyramid emphasizes anew the fact that it was, in reality, the supreme temple of the invisible and supreme deity. The great temple was not a lighthouse, an observatory, or a tomb, but the first temple of the mysteries, the first structure erected as a repository for those secret truths which are the certain foundation of all arts and sciences. It was the perfect emblem of the microcosm and the macrocosm. And according to the secret teachings, the tomb of Osiris, the black god of the Nile, Osiris representing a certain manifestation of solar energy, and therefore his house or tomb is emblematic of the universe within, which he is entombed, and upon the cross of which he is crucified. Through the mystic passageways and chambers of the Great Pyramid passed the illumined of antiquity. They entered its portals as men, they came forth as gods. It was the place of the second birth, the womb of the mysteries, and wisdom dwelt in it as God dwells in the hearts of men. Somewhere in the depths of its recesses there resided an unknown being who was called the Initiator, or the Illustrious One, robed in blue and gold and bearing in his hand the sevenfold key of eternity. This was the lion-faced Hierophant, the Holy One, the Master of Masters, who never left the House of Wisdom, and who no man ever saw save he who had passed through the gates of preparation and purification. It was in these chambers that Plato, he of the broad brow, came face to face with the wisdom of the ages personified in the Master of the Hidden House. Who was the Master dwelling in the mighty pyramid? The many rooms of which signified the worlds in space? The Master whom none might behold save those who had been born again? He alone fully knew the secrets of the pyramid, but he has departed the way of the wise, and the house is empty. The hymns of praise no longer echo in muffled tones through the chambers. The neophyte no longer passes through the elements and wanders among the seven stars. The candidate no longer receives the word of life from the lips of the Eternal One. Nothing now remains that the eye of man can see but an empty shell, the outer symbol of an inner truth, and men call the house of God a tomb. The technique of the mysteries was unfolded by the sage illuminator, the master of the secret house. The power to know his guardian spirit was revealed to the new initiate. The method of disentangling his immaterial body from his new defined vehicle was explained, and to consummate the magnum opus, there was revealed the divine name, the secret and unutterable designation of the supreme deity, by the very knowledge of which man and his God are made consciously one. With the giving of the name, the new initiate became himself a pyramid, within the chambers of whose soul numberless other human beings might also receive spiritual enlightenment. In the king's chamber was enacted the drama of the second death. Here the candidate, after being crucified upon the cross of the solstices and the equinoxes, was buried in the great coffer. There is a profound mystery to the atmosphere and temperature of the king's chamber. It is of a peculiar death-like cold, which cuts to the marrow of the bone. This room was a doorway between the material world and the transcendental spheres of nature. While his body lay in the coffer, the soul of the neophyte soared as a human-headed hawk to the celestial realms, there to discover first-hand the eternity of life, light, and truth, as well as the illusion of death, darkness, and sin. Thus, in one sense, the Great Pyramid may be likened to a gate through which the ancient priests permitted a few to pass towards the attainment of individual completion. It is also to be noted, incidentally, that if the coffer in the king's chamber be struck, the sound emitted has no counterpart in any known musical scale. This tonal value may have formed part of the combination of circumstances which rendered the king's chamber an ideal setting for the conferment of the highest degree of the mysteries. The modern world knows little of these ancient rites. The scientist and the theologian alike gaze upon the sacred structure, wondering what fundamental urge inspired the Herculean labor. If they would but think for a moment, they would realize that there is only one urge in the soul of man capable of supplying the required incentive, namely, the desire to know, to understand, and to exchange the narrowness of human mortality for the greater breadth and scope of divine enlightenment. So men say of the Great Pyramid that it is the most perfect building in the world, the source of weights and measures, the original Noah's Ark, the origin of languages, alphabets, and scales of temperature and humidity. Few realize, however, that it is the gateway to the eternal. Though the modern world may know a million secrets, the ancient world knew one, and that one was greater than the million, for the million secrets breed death, disaster, sorrow, selfishness, lust, and avarice, but the one secret confers life, light, and truth. The time will come when the secret wisdom shall again be the dominating religious and philosophical urge of the world. The day is at hand when the doom of dogma shall be sounded. The great theological Tower of Babel, with its confusion of tongues, was built of bricks of mud and the mortar of slime. Out of the cold ashes of lifeless creeds, however, shall rise phoenix-like the ancient mysteries. No other institution has so completely satisfied the religious aspirations of humanity, for since the destruction of the mysteries, there never has been a religious code to which Plato could have subscribed. The unfolding of man's spiritual nature is as much an exact science as astronomy, medicine, or jurisprudence. To accomplish this end, religions were primarily established, and out of religion have come science, philosophy, and logic as methods whereby this divine purpose might be realized. The dying god shall rise again, the secret room in the house of the hidden places shall be rediscovered. The pyramid again shall stand as the ideal emblem of solidarity, inspiration, aspiration, resurrection, and regeneration. As the passing sands of time bury civilization upon civilization beneath their weight, the pyramid shall remain as the visible covenant between the eternal wisdom and the world. The time may yet come when the chants of the illumined shall be heard once more in its ancient passageways, and the master of the hidden house shall await in the silent place for the coming of that man who, casting aside the fallacies of dogma and tenet, seeks simply truth, and will be satisfied with neither substitute nor counterfeit.